Well, there you go. Welcome back. Well, Mr. Nabena, let me take this back to you. When you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you say governors in the NGF actually compete, and that has to do with the collection or improving their IGR. But you know, there are people who will ask the question, because if they've heard several business persons say that, look, 5% of the SMEs in Nigeria survive in 1 year. So, and then they gave reasons why that is the case, because multiple taxation, levies, these are things that, you know, weigh heavily on SMEs, and that's why they don't survive. Isn't that an area where the government should actually be competing such that they provide service and not necessarily just having a way to just get more revenue from people who are not even existent?
So in recent times, in 2017 to be specific, we created a dashboard that tracks reforms across states related to tax administration and management. And some of these lessons are what we're sharing. So you mentioned double taxation. I think a state that has implemented one reform to address that has been Kaduna State. They put together a law, a consolidated revenue code that puts together all laws related to revenue collection, and it mandates one authority for the collection of taxes. Those are some of the lessons that we're sharing. So in Kaduna State, we have this law that addresses multiple taxation, and it makes the revenue authority, the Kaduna State Internal Revenue Authority, the only authority that collects taxes in the state. In Bauchi State, for example, they use POS machines in the villages. And even in collecting taxes generally, they use POS machines that print receipts electronically. So even where you do not have internet service, once you go to a location that has internet service, the figures, the payments are reflected in a central dashboard in the office of the tax authority. So some of these lessons are what we share to state governments, and I think that has been what has influenced the growth in revenue in the last couple of years. Like I mentioned, in the last 3 years, we've seen growth in IGL by over 20%, and most of those growth have been accounted for by the use of technology, improved collecting system, and consolidating the revenue accounts of states. States have not raised taxes. In fact, some of them have even cut taxes. But I think the biggest challenge we have is on revenue collection, in closing the leakages, in using technology, and some of those lessons we share to state governments. And in the last couple of years, we've seen a number of states adopt those lessons. And I'll tell you that there are still challenges that make some of these reforms lag behind. So capacity is a major issue across states. Data management is a major issue. And even funding. For technology, you need a lot of funding. And these challenges, they lag the results that we are supposed to see from some of these reforms that states are implementing. But on a whole, there are lessons that address most of the issues that we face that we can get from one state, and other states can adopt and improve some of their processes.
Well, that may address, you know, governance framework to see how some things work. But speak to what Dr. Adoji had raised in terms of us ensuring that we have this entrepreneurial mindset. How much is being done either by NGF or states to ensure that they increase that, unlock the potential that they have in their citizens? Because that is where many people will tell you that's where the wealth really is.
Yeah, I agree with you. In the employment potential, so over the years, we've seen ad hoc interventions. So we're not talking about pet projects. We're talking about understanding the size of your economy, understanding the structure of your economy, understanding the private sector. So at the NGF level, the conversation is not just about, okay, what can governments do, but how can governments influence the private sector? The government alone cannot drive the economy. How has the governor or the government managed to interface with the private sector to ensure that some of these gaps are filled? So education is a major issue, and those are long-term issues that states have been facing. But improving quality of education is there. But how do you also provide jobs, fair and equitable jobs? How do you influence services? But you need to understand your economy. You need to understand the private sector challenges. You need to be able to standardize some of the regulations, some of the laws you have. And I think the best example that we have as regards addressing unemployment and influencing the activity of the private sector has been Lagos State. In Lagos State, we saw the governor take the initiative of meeting private sector people monthly. And those are some of the lessons that we push to other states, that you need to engage with the private sector to ensure that the private sector is not competing with you, but the private sector is there to complement some of the efforts that you put in place. And those are some of the lessons that we try to influence. And we see a number of states take some of these initiatives, and we're seeing very good results come out of them.
Going by the, I'm going to underscore this question that Chamberlain just asked you a little more. If you look at the figures of the voters during the last election, you'll find out that more than 50% of them are youths. Measure that with the larger population of Nigeria, you find out we have a huge youth population. What's the plan to engage the youth? What's the strategy? What's the policy, or if you like, to engage the youth in each of these states or regions so that we do not have this continued problem of unemployment, or, to speak with what Mr. Adoji said Dr. Adoji said the other time, entrepreneurs from this young population?
I think when we talk about engaging the youth, it's a value chain challenge. So on one end, there's the skill set, providing skills, there's improving education. But on the other end, how do you ensure that those who are available to work find quality jobs? So that's what the conversation has been about. How do you influence the activities of private sector so that they are better able to make profits and expand their businesses? Earlier I mentioned that in the last decade and a half, we have experienced deindustrialization. So the manufacturing sector has declined significantly. How do we ramp up manufacturing? So if we talk about agriculture, for example, how do we ensure that we do not face the same challenges we face in the oil sector? In the oil sector, all our outputs are primary products. We export primary products. We export crude, and we import refined products. In the agricultural sector, how do we ensure that we do not only just produce maize or produce palm kernels or nuts and export them? How do we ensure that we provide a manufacturing framework, a processing zone, a system where people are engaged in the manufacturing system so that we do not produce primary products and just export them? We create a value chain for all the commodities that we produce to ensure that people are engaged and jobs are provided.
So what is the strategy? What's the strategy for doing what you have just said now? Is there a strategy in place?
No, I think generally we've had that challenge. We've had that challenge of managing some of these strategies. A number of states have put together some strategy, but I think at the federal level, there are processing zones that have been put across the geopolitical zones that states should engage with. And through those processing zones, they are better able to influence the activities of the manufacturing sector to ensure that goods that are produced are processed. And even for those processed, we improve the trading sector and we improve engagement. But at the state-specific level, those are challenges that we need to address. But on a national level, I know that there are export promoting zones, there are processing zones that have been put together for state governments. And you recall the example of the interaction between Kebbi and Lagos states. So some of these states also go into bilateral agreements as to how to ensure that the agricultural services or the agricultural commodities they produce are processed. So on a state-by-state level, states engage individually to influence some of these activities across the value chain.
Let me jump in and ask you briefly.
What will provide jobs for our people?
That last scenario, okay, still talking about job creation. That last scenario where you talked about the collaboration between Kebbi and Lagos, how much of the private sector component was involved in that? Any ideas?
I mentioned earlier that one of the challenges that we have is on economic management, and related to that is on how the states engage with the private sector. Now, the private sector over years has always complained about taxes, and we've seen that for many of the states that have not been able to make themselves fiscally sustainable, it's been because of the challenge of the role of the government. The role of the government hasn't always been to influence activities in the state because they're always concerned about, revenues from the federal government. When 70% of the allocation, for some states, is up to 90%. When 90% of the allocation comes from FAC, there's this dichotomy between what the state is doing and what the private sector is doing. But with some of the shocks that we have recently, a number of states have understood that there's really no way. We have to engage with the private sector, and we have to have these discussions to ensure that our states are better diversified, our people are employed, and we can better manage, social indicators in the state.
I wonder how much success they will get if they are forced to do something, not that they have a process or strategy to actually work that out. But Dr. Adoji, let me ask you, how much work do we need to do to move our mindset from, seeking these white-collar jobs than becoming entrepreneurs?
Well, Nigeria's economy has been, the value of our economy has been put at, I think, 583 billion USD after the rebasing. That is just about 50% of the market cap of Apple, or 50% the market cap of Amazon. Now, Amazon and Apple are two private companies in California. Between the two of them, they are 4 times the size of Nigeria's economy. What I'm saying is the government has no business being in business. All they need to do is to provide the enabling environment that will create opportunities that will engender entrepreneurship in our youths. David was talking about collaboration between KB and Lagos State. And the last time I checked, KB is an APC state. Am I correct? So also Lagos, APC state. Would there have been that kind of collaboration between KB and Akwa Ibom? You see, we talk about bipartisanship.
So that's a private sector approach, enterprise approach to governance.
To governance, simple. I was in Akwa Ibom about a week ago, and there were 3 or 4 jets that Akwa Ibom government just applied, procured. And I asked a simple question: why are these jets sitting here on the tarmac and not flying? They are expecting approval from some agency of government. And why are those planes not up? I can tell you, if you check and check properly, it will just simply be because Akwa Ibom is not a state that belongs to the ruling party. So there are a lot of intricacies, little things, little foxes that actually kill the plants. Now, to address your question directly, you see, entrepreneurship is simply about pursuing a defined task without necessary regards for the resources that you currently employ and control. And it has to do with, 1, we must be proactive. Number 2, we must take risks, and number 3, we must be creative. So if we help if the government will guarantee, that our youth can take risk, they can be proactive, can be innovative, then you see they try their hands on so many things, and before you know it will take flight. It's not about the number of times that they fail, but it's about that one success that will completely impact our society. There's a lot of creativity on the streets. When I was contesting elections some months ago, I said, whenever I see a youth, what I see is an industry. Let's give them the opportunity to express themselves. And until we unleash that potential, we're just kidding. Take example, Rwanda. The Rwanda's economy is just about $12 billion. It's the safest economy in Africa as it is now. It is the cleanest economy in Africa as we speak, and it has the fastest growing economy. Yet, it has a total size of an economy that is less the size of Zenith Bank, an institution in Nigeria. So it's not about the amount you control, it's about the creativity you bring to controlling them and how you monitor from start to finish. David was talking about value chain. One thing about value chain is that they are not a making of God. They are created by man. So if this value chain is not working, create another value chain. And what makes you think we need to sit within the framework of a value chain to be successful? No, we can be outliers. The mobile phone you carry today was not because you needed them. Somebody anticipated your need and created them. And there are issues like that. Let's create something that will be sellable. If you bring a product that anybody can buy, people will buy them.
You talked the other time about the youth, that you engaged with. Each time you see a youth, you see an industry. How easy or difficult is it to engage or activate a youth in entrepreneurship?
You see, the government needs to understand 2 things. creating opportunity, and sustainability. Now, sustainability here should simply mean leveraging the resources, our common patrimony, in such a way that it does not impact the ability of future generations, to exist. So create opportunities for them. Let me give you another example. Do you know each time you buy a Manchester, Chelsea, Nottingham, Liverpool jersey, do you know how many people are putting on their jobs in Europe? Even if it's by governments coming together to even sponsor, in real terms, the Nigerian League. And I was talking to some youths some months ago, and I said, okay, CBN will always tell you we have $43 billion in our foreign reserve. Do you know where those monies are kept? Most people don't know where those monies are kept. Those monies are not here in Nigeria.
So, let me just take Mr. Yusuf up on this one. Technology is big business, there's no doubt about that. And I think one can easily say that the youth play a significant role in that sector. But there doesn't seem to be much activity as far as the youth is concerned.
I think a lot is happening as far as the youth is concerned in the area of technology, ICT. A lot of activities are taking place online. The youth are developing all sorts of initiatives, already we have some outsourcing initiatives here and there. What is important in all of this is to provide the basic infrastructures.
How responsive has government been with that?
That is where we have the problem. You see, it is not for government to go and be bringing rice from one location and be bringing to another. No. Let's have a system that will work well such that the private sector entrepreneurs on their own will find it worthwhile to go to Kebbi, bring rice to Lagos. That is what is sustainable. What we have seen now, well, we have pockets of this lake, but it's a seasonal thing, more or less. So we need to build a sustainable system for this economy to thrive. And it comes to the very basic things of providing infrastructure, getting your institutions to support those who want to do. You don't have to tell them what kind of business they will do. That is the business of the entrepreneur. Yeah. Just create the environment. They will come up with the ideas. So for tech, I think that is even one of the easiest ways that the streets are thriving, because the barriers to entry is very low. You don't need a 100 kVA generator to be a software engineer, for instance. You don't need to go and buy some heavy amounts of diesel for you to be able to trade online. So a lot of that is happening among the youth. And we can do a lot more by creating more ICT hubs and making it easier for telecoms to deliver telecoms infrastructure. There have been a lot of complaints about this right of way. I mean, the Vice President mentioned it. The kind of pressure that the state governments put on the telecoms for them to lay cables that will serve their own people. That will open a lot of space, unlock a lot of potentials in use in ICT. So these things are important. Then secondly, let me talk about issue of accountability. It is the business of the state assemblies to have a check on their executives. In many of the states, you can hardly draw a line between the state assembly and the executive. So you have a situation where the state governors just get away with anything.
So politics is getting in the way of development.
Politics. I mean, the essence of having a parliament, legislature, and executive is for checks and balances.
All right.
In many of those states, it doesn't happen.
We'll come back to this, even though we don't have much time anymore. Don't go away. Well, David, just before, this is our closing moment for all of us. Just briefly tell us, lots of people are asking, all of these strategies, the policies, the collaborations you've spoken about, what's the target in terms of what kind of results should we expect and when?
I think on several fronts, I think we should expect more. On accountability and transparency, we should see more budgets published. We should see more financial statements published. On improving revenue generation, we should see more states improve their revenues. We should see more states eliminate taxes. One of your guests mentioned right of way for broadband penetration. Our recommendation is for those costs to be reduced drastically or even eliminated for a number of states. In terms of public financial management, we want to see more realistic budgets from states. We want to see states that engage better with the private sector. And we want to see state governments that have, plans that are linked or that are directly related to budgets that are implementable. On expenditure side, I think one of the major, challenges that we're about to face is payment of salaries. How do we ensure that states engage and share some of this information?
Well, don't forget, I think Dr. Adoji also highlighted the fact that they need to put politics aside and put development on the front burner such that states who are not in the same party can work together, sign papers and documents to ensure that things move. But gentlemen, leave us with your concluding thoughts, Dr. Adoji. What would you like to see them do?
Well, enterprise approach to leadership. Enterprise approach to sustainability issues. Let's begin to think about tomorrow and forget about what today would bring.
That applies to us as a people too when electing leaders.
Leaders and followers, all of us. We must push or pull in the same direction.
Well, we need to deal with issues of accountability at the state level. We also need to deal with issues of inclusiveness at the state level. Because what many of the state citizens have complained about is about the state governors going to bring people from outside the states to handle some projects, deal with economic issues, So when we talk about economic inclusion, it should also apply at the sub-national level. They should bring their own people into the mainstream of whatever economic activities is taking place. And we need to deal in the medium to long term on the fundamental issues of fiscal federalism. That is very important.
All right, Mr. Muda Yusuf, Dr. Victor Adoji, and David Nabena, thank you all for joining us today. This Workers' Day. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Osok.
I am Akide here saying have a wonderful and profitable day.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this program are those of the maker and do not reflect the views, opinions, and endorsement of Channels Television.